we're here in Beaver Stadium following Penn State's 22-21 loss to Northwestern. The main storyline in this one was that James Franklin and Penn State have dropped to 3-3 on the 2025 season when they started the year ranked number 2 and were pretty much one of the top favorites to win the national championship. Additionally, Drew Aller was confirmed by James Franklin to be out for the season after sustaining an injury toward the end of the game on Penn State's last offensive possession. Lyle, just kind of overall, what are your initial takeaways from this one?
Yeah, I want to start with Drew Aller. You could talk about all the criticism he's faced both as a player and who he is as a person, but you just got to feel for him. He's three-year starter, two-year captain, had an opportunity to finally get a game-winning drive against a team that has not been in Notre Dame, has not been in Oregon, just got hurt, and you hate to see it. He was emotional post-game. James Franklin never confirms a player being out for the year, and he did just that for him. So you got to feel for them. And then, you talk about a downward spiral. This team does not have his three-year starting quarterback going forward. It's going to move on to backup Ethan Grunkemeyer. This offense has struggled. We could point at so many different things. Run game not being established outside of Katron Allen finally getting the ball. Aller struggles, offensive line not playing its true potential. Wide receivers not getting separation. It's just all going to unfold moving forward. You're going to see this is a 3-3 team for the reason, and the offense has reflected that.
Yeah, I think we're at the point where it's questionable if Penn State's even going to be bowl eligible at this point. They play at night in Kinnick Stadium next week. They have Indiana, who just beat Oregon, coming up. They have Ohio State coming up. I mean, it's really in question. It's just kind of a crazy downward spiral. They're right there with Oregon 2 weeks ago, and then we're here, and they just lost the two worst teams in the Big Ten. At this point, it's safe to say they are the worst team in the Big Ten when you look at it on paper. And James Franklin was saying preseason, no one cares about preseason rankings, and at this point, he's proving himself right in the worst way possible. There were once again Fire Franklin chants throughout the game. The fans are not happy, and that has been very evident. I watched the guys scream at Franklin that he was a blue fraud and was the police climbed up the wall to shove him down the tunnel. It was just hostile in here, and I don't think that's going to change going forward, especially when Indiana comes to town and Nebraska comes to town. And still, James Franklin is no longer the coach of Penn State. But Lyle, I do want to ask you, do you think Penn State keeps James Franklin going forward?
I wrote last week after the UCLA loss that he should be fired. I think in the next 48 hours, he should be gone once again. If you're not going to fire him after a loss at UCLA, I think you should fire him after a loss at UCLA and Northwestern. Look, I get not firing him if that's the answer, just because of the buyout. But I think it's best for both sides to mutually part ways at this point. Franklin built this program up. He climbed the mountain. He's not going to get him up to that peak, right? And I think it's just best for both sides. I'm not going to doubt James Franklin's credibility as head coach. He could go succeed somewhere else, and I'm not going to be surprised. But this team wasn't going to be good next year or the year after that, from my opinion. And I think it's time to move on. You can't build a program back to what you want it to be without making some sacrifices, some consequences. You talk about all these seniors that came back for national championship aspirations, boost the draft stock. It's a 3-3 team, and arguably their draft stocks have plummeted. So Franklin, you could point some fingers. You got some personnel that you could also point some fingers at, but I think it's time to move on. If you're going to wait until they go play Ohio State when he miraculously pulls out a win, it's just what are you doing, right? It's time to move on. I don't think he's actually going to beat Ohio State. I want to add that right now. It's time to move on. I think it's best for both sides to part ways.
No, I fully agree, and I also do want to touch on, you mentioned some of the personnel, the coordinators. I think the defense has been a letdown post-Oregon. Obviously, they have 42 points to UCLA. They let Northwestern march down the field to score a touchdown to take the lead, and then let them just completely run out the clock. And the other side, Andy Kolnick has been catching heat all year. He was even catching heat a little bit last year after that Ohio State loss, the loss to Oregon in the Big Ten championship. But I think we're at the point where you had to fire Mike Yurcich because the offense was performing, and then you have to fire Andy Kolnick because the offense is performing. The person who's making those decisions is James Franklin. He is hiring these guys. He, at the end, is the one to blame for this point. I think a good analogy that someone sent to me an email actually after my Andy Kolnick column was that the CEO of a company doesn't say the CEO if he keeps making executive hires that aren't performing. I think that's where we're at right now. I think James Franklin is going to be the coach of Penn State come 40 hours from now, but I don't think that that's the right decision, and I would not be surprised if they amicably parted ways at the end of the season. But at the end of the day, Penn State is sitting at 500. They are not going to be receiving votes in this week's AP poll, and it's really unclear where they go from here.